And we're joined here today with Nathan Woodworth, CEO of James E. Wagner. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thanks very much for having me on.
Absolutely, and I appreciate your time. So for all of our visitors or viewers who may not be familiar with you, who are you and what have you been doing over the last few years?
Well, my name is Nathan Woodworth. I'm the CEO of James E. Wagner Cultivation, as you mentioned. I've been a cannabis grower since fairly early on in the MMAR process. I began growing cannabis first for myself, and then we grew into a moderately sized collective of patients and growers under that program. We performed a lot of research back in the MMAR days that led to the development of a brand new proprietary aeroponic production platform. When they announced the MMPR, we decided that it was a good time for us to make the changeover. We had the right people, the right tech, the right solutions to bring our terrific cannabis to the general commercial market for medical cannabis users here in Canada. And of course, we're excited to be scaling toward being able to approach the recreational market as well.
Well, glad to hear. And, you know, I was looking into you guys a little bit earlier, or I have been for some time, but more so this morning before our interview. And it was very interesting to see your background where it's right in your bio. You had chronic migraines and you're trying to find different ways of solving that. And you ended up finding that medical cannabis was the key to that. And then built that over the years. I believe it's been since about 2013 or 14, so it's not like you just started last year, correct?
Well, I was growing under the MMAR in 2006, 2007 was when I got started there.
Even earlier.
And we operated for some time as a collective of patients and growers. We had over a dozen growers working for us and dozens of patients in the region. And it was in that arena that we began doing research. So we were incorporated in 2013, but that was in response to a need to have a certain structure as a business so that we could approach the MMPR and the application process. We were in existence for a long time before that, and that's why we named the company after my grandfather. He was a farmer all his life, and he grew cannabis as well. And his father grew cannabis before him. In fact, my great-grandfather was growing cannabis before Prohibition. So we decided when we incorporated and we took on this new, more business-like structure that we should preserve our heritage. And so we named our business after my grandfather.
That's a very interesting story, actually. And it's a long lineage of growing, it seems like. But you mentioned the word structure and the structure of your business. Now, you are an LP, but you're also a technology company as well. Can you explain how you go into technology and how that's an aspect of your company as well?
It's an aspect of every licensed producer's business. Technology is inherently a part of all modern cannabis production. We can't produce high-quality, consistent medicine using the same traditional methods that my grandfather used. Instead, we turn to high-tech solutions. We need to understand the total process from a very scientific footing. We need to be able to control everything about the cannabis plant's life cycle in order to produce a top-quality finished product. And that's what really led us to identify as a technology company. Even before the MMPR, we had developed a series of unique technological solutions to address exactly that problem. My brother joined our collective very early on, and he's a PhD candidate in plant biology, and he got us set up on a research footing. And we began looking at all of the different ways that cannabis can be grown, the good and the bad, in order to understand all of the variables in that process. And that led us to the aeroponic technology that we use today. And today we call it the Growth Storm Production Platform. And it's made up of a variety of very high-tech solutions. We use, of course, the main aeroponic enclosure, one of the only aeroponic systems in the world specifically engineered for cannabis. But we have solutions which address the issues of trimming and drying. We have our unique cloning technology. So the Growth Storm platform really addresses the total job of producing cannabis from beginning to end.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about that actually, because that's something that I'm not too familiar with myself. I've been trying to learn over the last several months as I learned different techniques of growing and which LPs have different advantages in what different ways. But I find a lot of people are not familiar with aeroponics. You briefly just explained why you went into that, but what's the big difference between aeroponics and, say, hydroponics, or going just straight up into soil?
So you really describe those techniques on a gradient. Traditional soil culture, generally very traditional soil culture, doesn't use any sort of dissolved nutrients. Once we begin dissolving the nutrients in water, we've really switched into what we call hydroponics, and that's really where the name comes from. The nutrients are delivered in the water, which is delivered to the plant. And so all of those techniques, including the soilless soil type substrates that many producers use today, are technically hydroponics. We really, though, refer to a set of more advanced substrate techniques by the term hydroponics, and there we can use a variety of materials from rock wool, vermiculite, hydrogen pebbles, those sorts of things in order to encase the root mass. But hiding that root mass, putting it out of sight, offers a series of disadvantages, and it was those disadvantages that we set out to address. In aeroponics, the roots of the plant hang freely inside an enclosure, and they are misted with a very special proprietary nutrient solution. By removing any intermediate material between us and the plant, we drastically reduce the number of variables involved in the process. We're now able to deal directly with the organism itself. As a result, we could measure the total dissolved solids in one of our reservoir and the water level in that reservoir and repeat that process 15 minutes later and tell you to the microgram how much nutrition that plant has consumed. For the first time ever, that is an active measure of metabolic activity in a plant. We are watching the plant eat. This allows us an order of magnitude better data resolution. We now have access to more data on a more regular basis than has ever been achieved before. This in turn allows us to optimize our system to a much greater degree than has ever been achieved. As a result, we're able to drive higher yields per square foot, we're able to push through more iterations, more crops per year, and we're able to produce a cleaner, more consistent medicine. And all of that, of course, fails to mention the idea that by not bringing in any substrate material into our grow rooms, we're able to produce a product which is as clean as is possible as it leaves that room. Of course, Canada, we are required to do a biological analysis of the finished product before we offer it for sale. There's an acceptable range of biological contamination. Above a certain range, growers are required to irradiate their product. And of course, this is a process which is widely used throughout the industry. After irradiation, those materials test as zero biological contaminants. Most of our crops come out of our grow rooms with zero biological contaminants without any additional bioremediation. And this is because of the intense degree of control that we put into our process.
And that's interesting because a lot of people are concerned about that when they hear that their cannabis has been aerated, if I'm saying that correctly, and they don't like that. So you're skipping that, and I think this process of what you're doing, your aeroponics, it all ties into something you just recently filed a patent for, the GrowStorm dual droplet system. What is that, and why is that important to this, to everything that you're doing?
I'm really, happy to get a chance to finally talk about the dual droplet system because we've been working on it now for a few months. I first conceived of this advance in considering a problem that has existed in aeroponics from the beginning. And I should be clear, aeroponics has always been an incomplete, unfinished technology. We believe for the first time ever we've addressed some of those final level problems. We've advanced to the next generation of aeroponic technology, and we now have a system which is considerably more comprehensive than any of the existing aeroponic technology that's out there. The basic problem is, and I'm going to try not to get too technical here because I do love the science of the plant, but in the end, the roots of the plant grow most naturally when exposed to a very small droplet size. The original research into aeroponics found that the roots mimicked their growth pattern in a substrate material most accurately when we use a droplet size of less than 50 microns. The problem is that an aggressive growing plant like cannabis simply can't get all of the nutrients it needs at that droplet size. So we began by experimenting with a wide variety of droplet sizes, and we found that our best growth rates, our best product, our most controlled processes actually occurred at 180 microns, which is considerably higher than would normally be considered correct by the academic aeroponic community. However, it did offer the best results. But there were issues. We still didn't see that exact mimicry of the normal natural root growth pattern. So we always knew that there was more to be done, that there was additional work to be done. The dual droplet system now offers two different nutrient solutions which are delivered in two different droplet sizes. We use a very small droplet size, below 20 microns, to deliver a very narrow selection of nutrients, and then we use a larger droplet size at approximately 180 microns to deliver a wider range of nutrients. This has unlocked a new level of growth within the plants. Overall plant metrics across the board are seeing massive jumps. We're not going to be rolling out a formal report on this until the new year. We want to get a little bit more data, a couple more runs under our belt, just to make sure that these numbers that we're seeing are real. But if real, we've taken one of the most advanced systems in the world and we've advanced it again in a very material and significant way. The original growth storm system is capable of producing in excess of 350 grams per square foot of canopy a year. We're seeing significantly more than that with the dual droplet system. And we hope to be able to push to some of the highest yields ever recorded using this technology. In our grow rooms, we talk a lot about an old agricultural philosophical principle called Liebig's Law of Limits. Liebig was, in the 1800s, a natural philosopher who stated that a plant will grow to the maximum extent of the minimally available element. So there's always something in the system that limits it. And in aeroponics, we attack limits. We're always trying to remove the next limit and move to the next level of growth. And with the results we're seeing from the Growth Storm dual droplet system, we believe we may be approaching the genetic limit, the limit of what the genome of the cannabis plant is truly capable of for the first time ever.
Yeah, well, that's an answer. Yeah, you went into that in depth, and I appreciate that. And actually, I was going to ask you what type of yields you are able to get from that, but it sounds like this is a question I'm going to ask again in the new year. We'll have you back on because you want to make sure those numbers are correct. Like you were saying, you want to do a formal report in the new year.
And I'd be happy to come back and discuss that report. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting information here. You know, one of the things we say about the Growth Storm system, and in particular the Growth Storm dual droplet system, is that this is a process engineered for cannabis. But interestingly, it's applicable to any long growth cycle crop. Aeroponics has traditionally been very difficult to adapt to crops that take more than 40 or 50 days to grow. And we've addressed some of those problems with the original Growth Storm system, and now we believe that we have conquered all of the remaining issues with the dual droplet system. So much so that I'm going to be beginning a non-cannabis related experiment with the dual droplet system, and my kids are going to help me with this actually. We're going to try and grow an apple tree. And in a few years' time, if this experiment is successful, we will have grown the first multi-year plant, the first apples in history that have never known soil, which is very exciting. And I think that it has applications not only within the cannabis area, but also in agriculture in general. You know, these technologies are important. They are something that we're going to be turning to in the decades to come as a way to produce a lot of the crops that we're using traditional methods to produce today.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting actually, and I guess that's where the technology side of your company comes in, because it's helping you grow cannabis, but at the same time, I can imagine you can then use that technology and patent in other areas, and whether you white label it or whether you just go into other areas. That'd be really interesting. Now, we're getting close for time, but I did want to ask two questions that came from our investors. We always go to them at our Facebook group and just make sure that we get as many questions as we can from our investors to their CEOs and the companies they're interested in. And there's two questions. We'll start with the first. How's everything going at your new facility? I believe you had a news release recently as well on that, talking about the progress.
Progress is fantastic. It's the most advanced facility we can conceive of, and we believe it to be one of the most advanced designs for these types of facilities in the world. It's very exciting to see the last pieces of the puzzle coming together, and we are hoping to be moving into that space very soon. And we'll begin with 8 of our flowering rooms, increasing our total production ability by 130% at one fell swoop. And then we have a very smooth path to scale. We've designed this facility so that we can add 8 additional of our grow rooms every month, and we're going to continue to hit that deadline as we move forward. Everything is on track and looking beautiful, and we hope to have some images to share of the completed facility very soon.
Glad to hear. And then the last question before we let you go, I'm sure you hear this all the time and everyone's asking all their cannabis companies this. Do you have any plans for going onto an American exchange, on the Frankfurt, uplisting? Where do you stand on the stock market side of things?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at other exchanges. We're going to be moving into new areas. There's a lot of plans in that regard, and obviously the U.S. is an important marketplace right now. I think a lot of investors are looking at cannabis because of the potential imminent situation down that way. So that's our first stop, and then we are going to look into other areas. When you look at the patents that we filed, it's important to note that we filed them for Canada, and at the same time we filed them in the U.S. and in Europe. And I think that those are the markets that we have our eye on, and those are the areas where we're going to be looking to expand very shortly.
Well, hey, I appreciate answering some investor questions, coming on this show, taking your time to educate us a little bit more about what you're doing. You can find yourself on, I believe, the TSX Venture, JWCA, I believe, is the ticker. And it's been a pleasure having you on. We look forward to the new year because I'm actually very curious about those numbers when you are ready to have that report and come back on and tell us a little bit more about it.